There comes a moment in every life when the noise of the world begins to feel heavy, and the questions we've ignored become louder than the answers we've chased. Why do we suffer? Why does happiness fade so quickly? Is there a way to live with peace that doesn't depend on what we have or what we lose? Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha sat under a tree and saw clearly what most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. That life, by its very nature, is marked by suffering. But he didn't stop there. He saw its cause. He saw its end. And he walked a path that anyone, regardless of belief or background, can walk. That path begins with honesty. It continues with insight. And it ends in freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom within it. This is not just a teaching. It's a mirror. It's a revolution. It's a homecoming. This is the Four Noble Truths. 1. Why the Buddha taught suffering first, the gateway to liberation. The Buddha began not with metaphysics, not with heaven or gods or punishment or reward, but with a simple truth so honest, so clear, that most of us spend our lives avoiding it. Life involves suffering. He called it the first noble truth, not to scare us, not to depress us, but to wake us up. Because suffering is not the problem. Not seeing suffering clearly is. This teaching does not begin with belief. It begins with observation. And what the Buddha observed was this: no matter who you are, no matter how privileged or protected, suffering touches your life. Sometimes it's loud and obvious. The grief of losing someone you love, the heartbreak of betrayal, the sting of failure, the shock of illness, the ache of loneliness. These are the big, undeniable wounds. But most of the time, suffering is quiet, subtle. It hides in the cracks of everyday life. The pressure to be perfect, the fear of being judged, the exhaustion from chasing approval, the anxiety that never quite leaves your chest, the endless hunger for something more success, more love, more recognition, even when you already have so much. It's the stress of modern life: deadlines, screens, notifications, debt, pressure. It's the emotional heaviness of feeling like you're not enough, or like your life isn't meaningful, even when everything looks fine on the outside. It's the pain of comparison, the inner critic, the resentment that lingers, the guilt you carry quietly. It's the tiredness in your bones from pretending to be okay. It's the constant becoming, never simply being. This is the suffering we often ignore, the suffering we normalize. But the Buddha didn't ignore it. He named it. He said, "This is where we begin." Because if we cannot admit we are in pain, how can we ever heal? He wasn't offering a worldview. He was holding up a mirror. And what that mirror shows us is universal. Aging, illness, death, separation from what we love, being stuck with what we don't love, the pain of not getting what we want, the deeper suffering of getting what we want and realizing it doesn't last, the fact that everything is changing, even the moments we wish we could hold on to forever. And then there's the most subtle suffering of all, the unease that arises simply from having a mind that craves, resists, clings, compares, fears, and doubts, moment after moment, the restlessness of never fully arriving. This is not pessimism. This is clarity. And this clarity is the beginning of freedom. Because when we truly see our suffering, not just as bad luck, not as personal failure, but as the natural result of how we relate to life, we begin to shift. We stop blaming. We stop numbing. We stop needing to escape. We start to ask new questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this showing me? Not, how do I fix this? But, what am I holding on to? The Buddha began here, because here is where we are. Not in some future fantasy. Not in some perfect spiritual state. But here, in the mess, in the ache, in the real. And when we stop running, when we turn toward our pain, not to drown in it, but to understand it, something begins to soften. we realize we are not alone. That suffering is not weakness. It's not punishment. It's not evidence that life is broken. It's the first sign that we're awake, that we care, that we're human. And in that, there is dignity. There is strength. There is possibility. So this is where the path begins, not with escape, but with presence. Not with hope, but with honesty. Not with perfection, but with compassion. The first noble truth is not the end. It's the doorway, a doorway into a deeper way of living. And all it asks is that we walk through. 2. Understanding the many forms of suffering. When people first hear that life is marked by suffering, they often resist the idea. They look around and say, "But there's beauty too. There's love, joy, laughter. Surely life can't be defined only by suffering." And they're right. Life is full of richness and wonder. But the Buddha wasn't denying that. He was pointing to something deeper. He wasn't saying that joy doesn't exist. He was saying that even our joy is fragile. That even the sweetest moments are touched by impermanence. That behind our smiles, there's often a subtle fear that what we love could change or vanish. Suffering, then, is not just the obvious pain of illness, loss, or trauma. It's also the quiet anxiety that lingers when things are going well, but we're afraid it won't last. It's the restlessness we feel when we've achieved what we wanted, and yet something still feels missing. It's the boredom that creeps in, even when there's nothing wrong. It's the jealousy that rises without reason. It's the sense that something isn't quite enough, even when everything seems fine. This is the suffering that hides in plain sight. And perhaps that's the most dangerous kind, because it goes unnoticed. It becomes part of the background. We get used to it. We learn to live with low-grade discontent, like a constant hum in the back of the mind. And over time, we mistake it for normal. But it's not. It's suffering. And until we recognize it, we stay caught in it. We chase one thing after another, hoping to fill the void. We buy, consume, achieve, compare, distract. We build entire lives around avoiding discomfort. We keep ourselves busy to avoid facing what's underneath. But no matter how much we run, the restlessness remains. The Buddha saw this clearly. He saw that suffering is not just physical pain or emotional heartbreak. It's woven into the fabric of how we relate to life. It's in our clinging, our resistance, our fear of change. It's in the way we grasp for pleasure and push away pain. It's in our inability to be present with what is, because we're so busy trying to make things the way we want them to be. And yet, suffering is not the enemy. It's the messenger. It shows us where we're stuck, where we're out of alignment, where we're resisting reality instead of living in harmony with it. But to hear the message, we have to stop running. We have to slow down and feel. That's hard. Most of us are not taught to welcome discomfort. We're taught to fix it, fight it, or flee from it. But the path to freedom begins when we do something different, when we turn toward it, when we ask, what is this really about? What is this discomfort pointing to? Sometimes suffering comes from wanting what we don't have. Other times, it comes from fearing we'll lose what we do have. Sometimes, it's the pain of not being seen. Sometimes, it's the pain of hiding who we are. Sometimes, it's the tension of always needing to prove ourselves. Sometimes, it's the numbness of giving up on trying. And sometimes, it's just the subtle ache of feeling disconnected from others, from life, from ourselves. These are all forms of suffering. They may not be dramatic. They may not look like suffering on the outside, but inside, they weigh us down. They shape how we think, feel, and act. They influence our relationships, our choices, our sense of peace. And yet, the moment we name them, something begins to shift. Because naming brings clarity, and clarity brings power. When we can say, this is suffering, we stop blaming. We stop collapsing. We stop numbing. We begin to inquire. We begin to see. And in seeing, we create space. Space to respond differently. Space to soften. Space to understand that suffering is not a sign of failure. It's part of the human condition. It's not personal. It's universal. And when we stop pretending we're supposed to be happy all the time, we can begin to touch a deeper peace. Not the peace of always getting what we want, but the peace of being at ease even when we don't. The Buddha didn't teach suffering to depress us. He taught it to liberate us. He was saying, if you want to be free, start by being honest. Start by looking directly at what hurts, not to stay stuck in it, but to see through it, to understand its nature, to realize that what you're feeling is not unique to you. It's shared by all beings. And that recognition, instead of isolating you, can connect you. It can deepen your compassion. It can soften your judgment. It can make you more human. And that's the beginning of healing. The more clearly we understand suffering, the less power it has over us. We stop being surprised by it. We stop being afraid of it. We start to learn from it. And in that learning, we begin to walk the path, not away from life, but more deeply into it, with open eyes, with an open heart, with the courage to be present for all of it, the joy, the sorrow, the in-between. Because only by understanding the many faces of suffering can we begin to understand ourselves. 3. The origin of suffering. How craving and attachment create our pain. If suffering is the first truth, then the second truth is its root. And what the Buddha discovered was not a vague answer. He didn't blame life. He didn't blame the world. He didn't even blame other people. He turned the mirror inward. He saw that suffering arises from within, from the mind's endless craving, from its refusal to let things be as they are. This is where the path begins to deepen, because the first truth asks us to be honest about our pain. But the second truth asks us to see how we create that pain, moment by moment, through our reactions. It asks us to look at what we want so badly, what we cling to, what we chase, what we fear losing, what we refuse to accept. Craving comes in many forms. Sometimes it's obvious, the craving for pleasure, for recognition, for comfort, for success. But often it's subtle. The craving to feel safe, the craving to be understood, the craving to control outcomes, the craving for things to go our way. These cravings are not wrong, but they are the seeds of suffering. Not because wanting is evil, but because craving is demanding. Craving says, this moment is not enough. This situation is not okay. This feeling must go away. This person must change. This experience must last forever. And when life does not obey these demands, as it rarely does, we suffer. We suffer because we resist what is, because we cling to what isn't, because we fight reality instead of flowing with it. And the more we resist, the more stuck we become. The mind creates loops of dissatisfaction. It fixates, it replays, it imagines, it compares. It keeps us longing for the future or regretting the past. And in doing so, it pulls us away from the only place peace can ever be found, the present. The Buddha saw that craving is not just about desire, it's about attachment. It's not just wanting, it's needing, grasping, holding on tightly to something as if our happiness depends on it. And that's where suffering begins, because everything we cling to is impermanent. Everything we attach our happiness to is changing. The body changes, relationships evolve, feelings shift, circumstances move. And if we don't understand this, if we keep trying to anchor ourselves to what cannot stay, we will always feel unsteady. Craving is not the villain. It's a misunderstanding. It's the belief that happiness comes from getting what we want and avoiding what we don't. But the truth is deeper. Real peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from understanding it. And when we understand that craving is a reaction, not a necessity, we begin to loosen its grip. We begin to observe instead of obey, to pause instead of pursue, to feel the urge without following it. This is the beginning of freedom. When we start to see the mechanism at work, we stop being ruled by it. We recognize that we are not our cravings. We are the awareness that sees them. We are not our impulses. We are the stillness behind them. And in that seeing, we create space. Space to choose differently, to breathe instead of grasp, to soften instead of tighten, to let go instead of control. This doesn't mean we stop wanting. It means we stop believing that our happiness depends on getting what we want. It means we stop placing our peace on conditions. And in doing so, we begin to taste a deeper freedom, a freedom that doesn't rely on the world being a certain way, but arises from the way we relate to the world. That's the shift. From reaction to response, from craving to clarity, from need to presence. The Buddha didn't say we must kill all desires. He said we must understand which desires lead to suffering and which lead to freedom. The desire for truth, for wisdom, for compassion, these are not cravings. They are aspirations. They don't tighten the heart, they open it. They don't lead to attachment, they lead to liberation. So the question becomes, what kind of wanting is moving through you right now? Is it tightening or opening? Is it contracting or expanding? Is it pulling you into more grasping or guiding you toward more peace? The origin of suffering is not hidden. It's right here, in this breath, in this choice, in this moment of wanting something to be different. But so is the beginning of the end of suffering. It begins the moment you stop identifying with the craving and start observing it. The moment you stop following every desire and start questioning it. The moment you stop feeding the fire and start sitting with the heat. That is the second truth. Not as a belief, but as a practice. A way of living. A way of seeing. And when we live this way, suffering doesn't disappear overnight, but it loses its power. It no longer controls us. And in that space, something else begins to grow. Not craving, but clarity. Not resistance, but resilience. Not attachment, but freedom. 4. The end of suffering, the reality beyond clinging. After understanding that suffering exists and that it has a cause, the Buddha offered a truth so powerful, so radical, that it shattered centuries of spiritual fatalism. Suffering can end. Not just be numbed, not just managed, not just avoided, but truly and completely brought to an end. The third noble truth is not a theory. It is a lived possibility. And it begins where clinging ends. The Buddha wasn't offering another belief system. He was offering a release. A release from the habits that bind us, from the stories that torment us, from the cravings that keep us endlessly chasing after satisfaction that never lasts. He saw that the human mind is caught in a loop. Want, grasp, lose, suffer, repeat. And he discovered that the loop breaks, not when the world becomes perfect, but when we no longer cling to it. This is the secret. Peace does not come when everything goes our way. It comes when we stop needing it to. Liberation is not the absence of pain. It's the absence of resistance to pain. It's the freedom that arises when we stop believing that our happiness is dependent on what we can hold, control, or preserve. Because the truth is, everything we cling to will change. People leave, bodies age, feelings shift, moments pass. And when we accept this, not just intellectually, but in the depth of our being, something lets go. The tightness loosens. The chasing stops. And in that space, we discover something extraordinary. We are still here. We are still whole. We are still alive, without needing anything to be different. This is not indifference. It is not apathy. It is the deepest kind of love. A love that doesn't possess, a joy that doesn't depend, a peace that doesn't fear change. It is not about rising above life. It is about falling into it completely, without the armor of resistance. When craving ends, we begin to see clearly. we begin to feel more deeply. We begin to live more freely, because our minds are no longer tangled in what we don't have, what we might lose, or what we think we need to feel okay. We are just here, fully present, open, at peace. This state is not something mystical or reserved for the few. It is available to anyone who learns to let go, anyone who dares to stop grasping, anyone who pauses in the midst of craving and asks, "What if I didn't need this to be happy?" Anyone who realizes that freedom isn't out there, it's in the very space where we stop reaching. The end of suffering isn't about becoming special. It's about becoming simple. It's about remembering what's always been true, that who you are, beneath the layers of desire and fear, is already complete, already whole, already enough. You don't have to fix yourself. You don't have to conquer the world. You don't have to be anyone other than the one who is awake right now, listening. This moment, without anything added, is enough. Can you feel that? Not in your mind, but in your breath, in your body, in the quiet between thoughts. That's what the Buddha pointed to. Not a place, not a reward, but a quality of being. A way of living that is unshaken by gain or loss, that is unmoved by praise or blame, that rests in a peace that does not come and go, because it is not based on conditions. This is the reality beyond clinging. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. It is still, silent, steady, and it is yours. The moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop fighting, the moment you stop needing life to be different in order to feel free. Of course, the habit of clinging is strong. It doesn't vanish overnight. But each time you notice it, each time you pause, each time you choose presence over grasping, you taste a little more freedom. And eventually, those moments add up. They become your new way of being. Not because you forced yourself, but because you remembered what was always underneath, a natural, effortless peace. So the third truth is not a destination. It is a return. A return to what you already are when the mind stops spinning. A return to what you already know when you stop looking outward. A return to the space that's always been holding you, even when you forgot it was there. That space is not somewhere far away. It is here, now, in the breath, in the stillness. In the moment you stop and say, "I am enough. This is enough. Let it be." 5. The path. Living with clarity, wisdom, and compassion. If suffering has a cause, and if that cause can end, then there must be a way. That is the fourth truth. The Buddha did not simply name the problem. He walked the solution. He lived it. He tested it. And then he offered it, not as belief, but as practice. His path is not a straight line. It's not something to memorize. It's not a map someone else can follow for you. It is a way of walking through life with awareness, with kindness, with courage, with responsibility. The Buddha called it the middle way. A life not based on indulgence, nor on denial. Not built around extremes, but grounded in balance, in harmony, in clarity. And he described this path through 8 interconnected qualities of mind and action. Not steps to be checked off one by one, but aspects of a single integrated life. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These are not moral commandments. They are invitations, mirrors, practices that help you live in alignment with truth. Let's begin with right view, not belief, not opinion, but seeing things as they are. Understanding that everything is impermanent, that craving creates suffering, that clinging leads to fear. Right view is not passive. It is clear seeing. It's what allows us to respond instead of react, to act from understanding instead of confusion. Right view leads to right intention, the direction of the heart. Not just what we do, but why we do it. Do we act from greed or generosity? From hate or love? From delusion or clarity? Right intention plants the seeds for right speech. The words we speak shape the world around us and within us. Every sentence is an offering. Every conversation is an opportunity to build or to break. Right speech is honest, kind, necessary, and timely. It is not just about avoiding lies. It's about using your voice to heal, not to harm. From speech comes right action. How we move in the world. How we touch others. How we live. Do we act from awareness or from impulse? Do our actions reflect our values? Right action is about living with integrity. Not because someone tells us to, but because it feels clean. It feels aligned. It feels peaceful. Right action connects with right livelihood. The way we earn our living. The energy we put into the world. Do we create more suffering or more well-being? Are we part of healing or harm? It's not about having a perfect job. It's about living your work with awareness. Doing what you do with care, with presence, with intention. Then comes right effort. Not forcing, not striving, but nurturing. Tending to the mind like a garden. Watering what is wholesome. Uprooting what causes harm. It's not about being aggressive with ourselves. It's about being committed, steady, gentle but firm. Right effort leads to right mindfulness. The heart of practice. The willingness to be here. Not lost in the past. Not leaning into the future. But present, awake, aware of the body, the breath, the emotions, the thoughts. Watching the mind without clinging or pushing. Letting each moment rise and pass without being caught. And from mindfulness arises right concentration. The ability to be still, to gather the scattered mind, to rest deeply in presence, not to escape, but to connect, not to numb, but to know. Concentration is not just about meditation, it's about stability, the power to stay, the strength to meet life without being swept away. These 8 qualities form the path, but not a rigid path, a living path, a path that breathes with you, that meets you where you are, and invites you again and again to return, to begin, to wake up. This path does not lead you somewhere else. It leads you deeper into this moment, into the heart of life, into your own being. The Buddha never asked anyone to follow him blindly. He asked them to try, to see, to taste the fruits of this path for themselves. And those fruits are real. They are peace. They are freedom. They are compassion. They are clarity. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your relationship to life transforms. You stop clinging. You stop running. You stop needing the world to meet your demands in order to feel okay. And in that letting go, you become more alive, more present, more kind. That is the power of this path. It does not require you to change the world, only to change how you walk through it, with open eyes, with a steady heart, with the courage to live in truth, and the wisdom to meet each moment, not with resistance, but with love. 6. Living the 4 truths in a modern world, applying wisdom to everyday life. The 4 noble truths were spoken over 2,500 years ago, under a tree in a quiet forest, to a handful of seekers who had turned away from the world in search of something real. Today, we live in cities made of glass and metal. We carry entire worlds in our pockets. Our lives are flooded with information, noise, distraction, comparison, deadlines, and pressure to always be doing, achieving, becoming. The question is no longer, what is the truth? But how can I hear it beneath the noise? And yet, despite all the change on the outside, the human heart remains the same. We still seek happiness. We still fear pain. We still cling to what feels good and resist what feels hard. We still get caught in desire, attachment, expectation, and fear. In that way, The Four Noble Truths are not ancient. They are immediate. They are alive. They are breathing beneath every conversation, every thought, every conflict, every longing. The only difference is that now our distractions are louder. The stakes feel higher. The pain of being pulled in 1,000 directions is not just emotional. It is physical, mental, and spiritual. So how do we live the four truths in this modern world? We begin by remembering what they are pointing to. Not rules, not rituals, but a shift in how we relate to life. We begin with honesty. Instead of pretending we're fine, we learn to say, yes, there is suffering here. Not because something is wrong with me, not because I'm broken, but because I'm human. And this world, for all its beauty, is uncertain, unstable, and constantly changing. We see that suffering is not always dramatic. It is the low hum of anxiety when scrolling through perfect lives on social media. It is the restlessness after reaching a goal and still feeling empty. It is the sting of rejection, the fear of missing out, the fatigue of trying to prove our worth in every interaction. And instead of running from these feelings, we learn to meet them with awareness, with compassion, with curiosity. We begin to notice the craving, the subtle voice that says, if I just had this, then I'd be okay. We see it in the way we check our phones, in the way we replay conversations, in the way we want to be liked, to be right, to be seen. We start to recognize that we are always reaching for something: status, control, attention, escape. And in that recognition, we learn to pause, to breathe, to ask, what am I really looking for? What am I afraid to feel? What would happen if I just allowed this moment to be exactly as it is? These questions are not spiritual games. They are doorways. They return us to ourselves. They remind us that suffering isn't something we have to run from. It's something we can understand. And in understanding it, we begin to let it go, slowly, gently, not all at once, but breath by breath. Living the four truths means slowing down enough to notice what's driving us. It means asking, am I acting from clarity or confusion? Am I speaking from fear or love? Am I holding on or letting go? In our relationships, it means we stop blaming others for our pain and start asking what we're clinging to. It means we learn to forgive, not because what happened was okay, but because we don't want to carry it anymore. In our work, it means we do what we do with presence, with ethics, with awareness. We don't have to quit our jobs and live in caves. We just have to bring our full selves into what we're doing. To ask, is this causing harm? Is this creating peace? Is this aligned with what matters? Even in conflict, the four truths are alive. We see that arguing from ego only deepens suffering. That needing to be right often costs us connection. That silence, when rooted in wisdom, can be more powerful than 1,000 words. We begin to replace reaction with reflection, judgment with compassion, certainty with humility. And in moments of joy, we remember that even this is temporary. That doesn't make the joy less beautiful. It makes it more sacred. We savor it. We don't cling. We bless it and let it pass, knowing it was never meant to stay. This is how the path becomes real, not in monasteries, but in kitchens, in meetings, in traffic, in heartbreak, in laughter. The truths are not far away. They are right here, in your morning routine, in your evening thoughts, in the way you treat your own pain, the way you treat others, the way you respond to the million small moments that make up a day. When you live with awareness, every moment becomes practice. Every challenge becomes a teacher. Every breath becomes a choice. This is not about being perfect. You will forget. You will fall. You will cling again. But each time you remember, even for a second, you take a step on the path. You reconnect with what's real, with what frees you, with what brings you home. The Four Noble Truths are not religious commands. They are invitations to live differently, to love more fully, to suffer less. And in a world that never stops moving, never stops demanding, never stops pulling us outward, that is the most radical act we can make, to turn inward, to see clearly, to live simply, and to meet life as it is, with a steady mind, a soft heart, and a deep knowing that peace is not found in escaping the world, but in seeing it clearly and walking through it with wisdom. 7. The inner revolution. How the Four Truths transform the mind. At first, the Four Noble Truths may seem like ideas, something to think about, something to consider. But the more we live them, the more we realize this is not a philosophy. It's a revolution, not outside, but within. The Four Truths don't just change what you do. They change how you see, how you feel, how you think, how you relate to everything. They don't ask you to fix the world. They invite you to meet the world differently. And in that shift, everything changes. The mind is usually restless, grasping, judging, comparing, anticipating. It jumps from past to future, from fear to desire, from self-blame to blame of others. This is the ordinary mind, a mind that has not yet understood the nature of suffering. But when we truly live the Four Truths, the mind begins to quiet, not because we force it, but because it sees clearly. It no longer clings. It no longer reacts blindly. It no longer believes every thought or follows every urge. Instead, it pauses. It breathes. It becomes curious. Instead of thinking, this shouldn't be happening, the mind starts to say, what is this moment teaching me? Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this pain? It asks, what am I adding to this pain by resisting it? That's the inner revolution, from reaction to response, from avoidance to attention, from blame to understanding. Slowly, the mind transforms from a battlefield into a sanctuary. This doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means we meet difficulty with wisdom instead of panic, with compassion instead of control. We stop turning suffering into stories. We stop needing everything to go our way. We stop outsourcing our peace to external events. And we begin to realize nothing outside of us has to change for us to be free. That's a radical shift. The kind of shift that rewires how we experience everything. Because when the mind is rooted in truth, it becomes stable, spacious, kind, even in pain, even in chaos, even in the unknown. This transformation is not dramatic. It's not always visible, but it is profound. You notice it in small ways. You pause before speaking. You breathe instead of snapping. You sit with discomfort instead of reaching for distraction. You forgive faster. You carry less resentment. You need less validation. You begin to trust your own presence more than anyone else's approval. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop resisting your own humanity. That is what the Four Truths do, not by force, but by insight. They don't require belief. They require honesty, attention, a willingness to look inside. And when we do, we start to see clearly. We see that we are not our anger. We are the awareness behind it. We are not our cravings. We are the space in which they arise and pass. We are not the stories we tell. We are the silence beneath the story. And in that space, we discover a freedom that no external condition can give or take away. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to who we already are before the mind got noisy, before fear took the wheel, before we forgot how to be still. The inner revolution doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from insight, from a deep, lived seeing that changes you forever, not because something new was added, but because something false was seen through. This is how the Four Truths work. They dissolve illusions. They strip away what is not real. They reveal the peace that has been waiting under all the layers. So if you feel different after walking this path, even a little more open, a little more calm, a little more awake, know that the revolution has already begun. Not in the world, in you. 8. Beyond belief, realizing the four truths through direct experience. At some point in the journey, something changes. The Four Noble Truths are no longer ideas you think about. They are no longer teachings you try to remember. They become something you see, something you live, something that lives through you. This is the moment when practice becomes realization, when knowledge turns into wisdom, when the map is no longer needed because you've begun to walk the ground yourself. The Buddha never asked for belief. He asked for exploration, for curiosity, for direct looking. He knew that no one could be liberated through faith alone, because faith without experience is fragile. But understanding that arises from your own heart, that is unshakable. The four truths were never meant to be memorized. They were meant to be seen, touched, felt, lived. And when you do, they change everything, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. You no longer need to convince yourself that suffering exists. You see it in the disappointment of unfulfilled desire, in the tension of clinging, in the pain of resisting what is. You don't have to take anyone's word for it. You feel it directly. And then you see the cause, not out there, in here. You notice the grasping, the pushing, the avoiding. You catch the mind reaching for something just out of frame, believing it will finally make you whole. And in that moment of recognition, something loosens. You realize, this isn't who I am. This is just a habit, a pattern, and I don't have to follow it. You begin to feel the space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you find choice. You begin to taste the end of suffering, not as a concept, but as an actual, lived presence, a moment of stillness, a breath without resistance, a mind that doesn't fight the moment, but allows it. And from that stillness arises a deeper knowing that peace is not something you achieve, it's something you uncover. It's not somewhere you get to, it's what remains when the noise quiets, when the dust settles, when the craving drops. And then you walk the path, not because you're trying to reach something, but because the path is the expression of your freedom. You speak kindly not to earn points, but because you have nothing to prove. You act wisely not to please others, but because it brings peace to your own heart. You stay mindful not out of discipline, but because awareness feels like home. This is what it means to realize the four truths. They are not separate from life. They are the way life actually works. And the more clearly you see, the more simply you live, the more compassion flows, the more freedom becomes natural. You stop needing to escape. You stop needing to fix yourself. You stop needing to seek meaning in every corner of the world, because meaning begins to arise from presence itself, from this breath, from this step, from this moment. And so, the Four Noble Truths are not a ladder to climb. They are a mirror that reflects back the truth you've always known, beneath the confusion. You are not broken. You are not separate. You are not behind. You are simply learning to see clearly, to love deeply, to live wisely. This is the path. This is the truth. Not something far away, but already here, already now, already waiting for you to stop, to look, and to finally remember what you've never truly forgotten. The Four Noble Truths are not a system to master. They are not a checklist to complete. They are a way of seeing, of being. They invite us to stop running, to stop clinging, to stop waiting for life to be perfect. They show us that suffering does not make us broken, that craving is not who we are, that peace is not far away, and that the path has been here all along, waiting quietly beneath our rushing thoughts, our silent grief, our longing to be whole. So as this journey ends, may you begin again, with eyes open, with heart soft, with mind steady. May you suffer less. May you cling less. May you love more. May you walk the path, not toward escape, but toward the truth of who you already are.